Hello and welcome back to Bicycle Legs and another edition of Anniversary Albums. Today we're looking at albums that have had a significant anniversary in the month of September 2022. Again, for those who are new to this concept, when I say a significant anniversary, I'm talking about one that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 25th, 30th, 45th, 50th, that sort of thing. I had so many to choose from this month, so I've left a whole lot out. So please let me know in the comments which ones I've left out, because I do try to keep this show to 10 albums per episode. I could have easily done 20 or 25 for this month because there are just so many albums having significant anniversaries this month. But I have kept it to 10. As I say, let me know in the comments which ones I've missed, because I always love to know. Maybe they were on my longer list, maybe there were ones I completely forgot about. Anyway, let's start with an album that is having its 40th anniversary in the month of September. It was released on the 6th of September 1982, and that is Primitive Man by Icehouse. Now, this was the first album that they released under the Icehouse name. They had released an album previously as Flowers, and that album was called Icehouse. They had to switch it around because there was another band called The Flowers that they were clashing with, so they changed the name of the band to Icehouse. This is their second album, and as I say, the first under the Icehouse banner. And it was also their first album that really had some success outside of Australia, because Hey Little Girl and Great Southern Land and what was the other one that was a hit? Street Cafe. They were quite popular in the UK in particular. So this was Ivor Davies' first real taste of international success, this album. The first album had done very well here in Australia, but not really outside. This was the first one to sort of hit internationally. They'd later have hits in America with Crazy and Electric Blue from their Men of Colours album, which is also actually having its 35th anniversary this month, but I've left that one off the list. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 8th of September 1972. It is an all-time classic of progressive rock, and that is Close to the Edge by Yes. I don't know if I necessarily agree, but I know there's a lot of people who say this is the best progressive rock album of all time. I don't know if I'd quite go that far. I'm not even sure it's necessarily my favourite Yes album, but it is an incredible album. Just the three songs, three very long songs. You have Close to the Edge, the title track that takes up all of side one, and then you have And You and I and Siberian Khatru on side two. All three of them are absolutely marvellous tracks. Just incredible, really quintessential progressive rock. The next album is definitely not progressive rock. It's having its 45th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 9th of September 1977, and that is Lust for Life by Iggy Pop. This is the second of two albums that Iggy did in Berlin with Bowie. The first one was The Idiot, which came out earlier in 1977. This one, I mean, it's famous for the title track, of course, that became much more famous to people later on from the movie Trainspotting. But this also has The Passenger, which was covered by Susie and the Banshees. Neighborhood Thread is great. Fall in Love with Me, Some Weird Sin, 16. It's a wonderful Iggy Pop album. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 40th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 10th of September 1982, and that is Peter Gabriel's fourth album. This was my introduction to Peter Gabriel, because the first Peter Gabriel song I ever heard as a kid was Shock the Monkey, and that's on this album, and is still one of my favourite Peter Gabriel songs. This is possibly my favourite Peter Gabriel album. I know that's not a common choice, but I just love every song on this album. The Rhythm of the Heat is intense. San Jacinto, I Have the Touch is wonderful. The Family and the Fishing Net really gets to me. Shock the Monkey is sort of the one really sort of poppy hit on the album. Then you have Lay Your Hands on Me, Wallflower and Kiss of Life. There's a lot of real atmosphere and texture in this album, sort of hints of world music, and probably the best use of Fairlight I think I've ever heard. It doesn't have that sort of quintessentially the sort of Fairlight sound that so many other records from the early to mid 80s had. He uses it very, very well. Speaking of albums that are having their 40th anniversary in the month of September, we also have this one, which is The Dreaming by Kate Bush, originally released on the 13th of September 1982. Again, this one would be right up there for favourite Kate Bush album. If I ever do a studio albums ranked, it'll be in the top 3 for certain. It's possibly her strangest album. Again, uses the Fairlight really well, doesn't have that sort of stereotypical, that's the word I was looking for earlier, that stereotypical sort of Fairlight sound that a lot of records from the early to mid 80s had. She uses it very well for sort of textures and moods and that sort of thing. This has one of my favourite singles of hers on it, which is Sat in Your Lap. But The Dreaming, the title track, is wonderful. Night of the Swallow, Get Out of My House, Houdini. It's just a wonderful album. As I say, possibly her strangest and least commercial in some ways, but just a wonderful, intriguing, and just a wonderful album. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 45th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 16th of September 1977, and it is the debut album from Talking Heads, one of my favourite bands of all time. Talking Heads 77. This is the early Talking Heads. They hadn't gotten into the sort of the world music and the Afro beats and the funk and that sort of thing. This is very much sort of the post-punk, new wavy kind of Talking Heads, with that sort of naive, deliberately naive sound to it and lyrical content. You have things like Uh-Oh, Love Comes to Town, which is wonderful, New Feeling, Happy Day, No Compassion, Who Is It? Of course, it has Psycho Killer, which is one of the very first classics of Talking Heads. But it also has Pulled Up and Don't Worry About the Government and The Book I Read. All songs that I really, really love. Definitely a favourite Talking Heads album of mine. I don't remember quite where I put this in the ranking, probably somewhere in the middle, just because some of those other albums are even more brilliant than this one, but this is a fabulous album. The next album we're going to have a look at is also having its 45th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 23rd of September 1977, and that is Asia by Steely Dan. I don't know if this is my favourite Steely Dan album, but it's definitely one I go back to a lot because the sound of it is just incredible. And the songs are really, really good. Wonderful, complex, jazzy, but still accessible and poppy at the same time. It's wonderful how they could sort of combine those two elements of jazz and pop and make things that were simultaneously complex and still very, very listenable. I mean, Black Cow is wonderful. Deacon Blues I've always loved. The title track, Asia. Josie is great. Just a really wonderful, probably some people call it yacht rock. I don't know if I'd go quite that far, but it's definitely smooth and wonderful to listen to. Smooth is definitely not what I would describe this next album as, though. It's having its 20th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 24th of September 2002, and that is In Absentia by Porcupine Tree. This was the very first Porcupine Tree album I ever heard. I used to have an old friend, as the cockatoos are screeching in the background, I used to have an old friend at a place I used to work, and unfortunately he's no longer with us. But he and I used to swap CDs with each other and say, hey, you should listen to this, and he'd say, oh, you should listen to this, and we would discover music through each other that way. And one day he gave me the CD of In Absentia, and I've basically been a Porcupine Tree fan ever since. I think that might have been in 2003. But, you know, leads off with Blackest Eyes. That was, we recently did a show over on Rock Daydream Nation, which I'll leave a link to in the description, where myself and a large panel each picked a song from 2002 to make a mixtape, and I picked Blackest Eyes because it was the first Porcupine Tree song I ever heard, and it reminds me of my old friend John, which is really, really nice. But you've got Trains on here too. You've got Sound of Muzak. You've got Gravity Eyelids. The Creator Has a Master tape is just intense. This was their first album that really sort of went into progressive metal territory. And that's the sort of field they would then explore for the next few albums until they broke up. So it's still possibly my favourite Porcupine Tree album. I will have to do a Porcupine Tree album, studio albums ranked show at some stage. I'm still trying to figure out where the new album would fit in there, but it would be fairly high up because I think it's a really good album. And if you haven't seen it, I did a review on the most recent Porcupine Tree album. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. The next album is having its 50th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 25th of September 1972, staying in the world of heavy music, and that is Black Sabbath Volume 4. This was the first album, I think, where they really started to get away from their original sludgy sound and start to explore a little more. Try and get a little more creative, as it were. You have songs like Changes and Supernaut and Snowblind and, you know, Wheels of Confusion. They're just starting to expand their realm a little bit. You know, they're taking a little bit longer to record albums. I mean, those first three albums were all sort of recorded in a few days each, whereas they took a little bit more time with this one. I know it's Pete Pardo from Sea of Tranquility's favourite Black Sabbath album. It would definitely be in my top 3 or 4, I think. And the last album we're going to have a look at today is having its 45th anniversary in the month of September. It was originally released on the 30th of September 1977. It's another debut album, and that is New Boots and Panties by Ian Dury. Now, Ian Dury had done an album previously with a band called Kilburn and the High Roads, but this was his first album as sort of a solo act, although it's not credited to them. The Blockheads are on this album. But, you know, just wonderful songs on here. I think my version has a couple of songs that weren't on the original, like Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll. But you've got Wake Up and Make Love With Me. You've got Sweet Gene Vincent. You know, this is wonderful sort of, it's a combination of sort of the British pub rock, but definitely with a sort of new wave influence and a little bit of a reggae influence on occasion. You've got Clever Trevor, you've got the song Blockheads. It's just a fabulous album and one of Ian Dury's very, very best, I think. So those are my 10 albums that I've picked for anniversary albums for the month of September in 2022. Please, I know I've left a ton out, so please let me know in the comments which albums I've left out and which ones you think I should have included. A couple of them are albums that I have talked about recently in other shows on the channel, and that's why I didn't include them here. But please, you know, let me know. And sometimes you guys surprise me and say, oh, this album came out in that month too, and I'm like, I hadn't even thought of that. I didn't realize that. So please let me know in the comments which albums you think I should have included. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I've got anniversary albums for pretty much a whole year now. I think my first one was in fact October of 2021. So there's a bunch of anniversary album shows you can have a look at. There's a playlist for that. There's playlists for everything. So there's a playlist for my studio albums ranked shows, for my in defense of shows, my favorite albums of all time, my reviews, and so on and so on. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram, I'm mostly posting the albums I happen to be listening to at the time, as well as channel updates. On Twitter, I talk about anything and everything, and you can also see my absolutely terrible Wordle scores. But I am definitely trying to give Twitter more of a music focus. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.